Welcome to China Manufacturing Decoded from Sofeast, the podcast where we take you through some of the major topics facing importers and manufacturers in China today. Hello, welcome along to episode 11 of the podcast. In the last episode, we looked at some of the dangers you'll face if you do select the wrong Chinese supplier. In this episode, we're going to start looking at the initial vetting process. So, as an importer, what should you be doing in order to assure that you're finding the best possible suppliers in China? In order to get the tips and the advice that you need, I spoke to Renaud.
So after the last episode, which was episode 10, we looked at some of the bad behaviours that you don't want in your new Chinese supplier. Continuing on from that, we're now moving on to the initial vetting process. And so this is going to be some of the things which you as an importer, when you're looking for this new supplier, need to think about. Maybe some of the actions you should take and some of the questions you should be asking. And there's quite a few tips that you can provide to the listener on this, right?
Yes, we're going to try to keep it down to 40 minutes.
Right.
Yeah, the idea here is simply, without spending much time, without even going on site, without getting technical, what are the things that you can have a quick look into, basically to raise some red flags and eliminate quickly the candidates that you think you should not talk to.
And those are the guys that are likely to perhaps scam you or to behave badly, which is what we already talked about.
Right. Yes, people who lie about the basic facts about their business, people who pose as manufacturers when actually might be a couple of guys in an apartment, this kind of things.
Right.
And a few others. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, let's hear then from you your tips on how to weed out these bad apples, and hopefully this will really start to give a framework on how importers can get started with this.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to take it away?
Sure.
on your first tip?
Yeah, sure. So, and I'm going to mention a number of tips here that might seem a bit disjointed. It's like, oh, you can check this and you can check this and you can check that, but it's there's no real way of categorizing them. It's just a number of different ways to raise the red flags when they should be raised. First one is very simple. To say, oh yeah, okay, hey, hi, okay, this product here is interesting and so on, but we don't go right into ordering. We have a little bit of a qualification process for suppliers, and we take these relationships seriously, and we always send an auditor to the factory. And now, if you're talking about very, very small orders, or if they are afraid that you're really a small player, they might say, well, I don't know about that. Here's some photos, here's whatever. Right? And it might be for perfectly legitimate reasons. Okay. Now, if they are they're very serious about getting your order, they know that big customers, will want to come and have a look. Will want to usually send an auditor or do the audit themselves. Okay, they know it's part of the game. It actually puts you in the same league as their big customers. So depending on how you come up with that, it might actually reinforce your status as a serious buyer. Now, why is this likely to raise a red flag when they're not the right people? If you've asked a few questions first, oh, okay, so what do you do? And oh, so you're a manufacturer. Okay, so how many operators? Oh, 350. Okay, and how many engineers and how many blah blah blah, and how many floors of the building and da 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 da. And you say, we'll come and check all this up. It's part of our qualification process. if they're like, no, it's not really possible, like we're moving to a new place, it's not so easy, blah blah blah. This is a red flag right here. Okay, and that's an easy one. I mean, this really doesn't cost you anything. Just throw something and see their reaction, right? And if
Sure. I mean, what are they hiding?
exactly, yeah. If they are a proud factory that's that's really got good systems in place and everything, maybe what they would say is, that's fine. I mean, you could visit, but we want to see first, the significance of your business before we commit someone like our quality manager to talk to your auditor for a full day, and that's perfectly legitimate. And maybe you say, well, we only take him like 45 minutes, and then we'll just walk through production. Maybe someone from production can take us around there, and then we have a few questions. The salesperson can respond, and that's it. We'll go, right? But depending on the reaction, it can be pretty interesting. So that's the first thing I usually say. Well, the second thing is, obviously, if you go through and you actually do it, you obviously you will know much more. But here, let's stick to the very simple things. Another one is, hey, if they have been scamming customers, they've been frustrating, hundreds of foreign companies, there's going to be some trace somewhere on the internet, right? So if they're called, I don't know, Dongguan Everwin Toy Factory, Google that, Dongguan ever reach whatever, scam or problems or cheated. If you find something right there, if you find some really bad stuff, it's a bit scary. I mean, I've I've found a lot of very interesting things. Even some of the that dates back. But I remember when I was working in a trading company in Hong Kong about 15 years ago. One of the companies that we were giving orders to, I found out, was actually on the list of companies investigated by the U.S. Senate for prison labor. Oh, okay, wow. Maybe we should have checked that earlier. That doesn't sound too good, right? And this is the kind of things, I mean, I know how it happened. Someone before me had found them on the Canton Fair, and prices were good, and it was one of these import-export companies, basically a trading company that was farming that to different factories. None of the customer was checking that out, and some of that might have been made in a jail. I mean, that's the realities of China. But just to illustrate, yes, and there's a lot of things you can find. Another thing is, there's a lot of information now. If they have an Alibaba account, a Global Sources account, a Made in China account, and so on, well, obviously, all the information you find there is geared at making you feel that they are a good supplier, right? I mean, Alibaba is paid for that. Global Sources, even though they are more serious, they are paid for that. It's a directory, right? Yellow pages with quite a few photos and everything, but it's still the same business model. So they more and more over the past few years, they have tried to put more information. So some of the information is verified directly from government databases. Some of the information is collected on site under the brand name of TUV, Bureau Veritas, and some others. I'm saying under their brand name because it's, well, I'm not sure if the full-time employees doing this. I mean, it's basically someone coming and they have half an hour to take a bunch of photos and to check three, four, five things, and then they go. This is basically what they do. But you see a lot of photos. It gives you an idea of how they're set up, what really their equipment looks like and everything. So it's good. It's good. Definitely better than just relying on photos sent by the supplier, because maybe that great piece of equipment looked great 15 years ago, right? And now it's totally run down, hasn't been maintained. I mean, maybe it's been disposed of already, or probably more likely sitting in a corner somewhere because they don't want to throw things away. So that's good. You can get a lot of information there. And also, hey, guess what? There might be some contradictions, so you have some basic information that they give you here and there. They have an email signature. They have maybe quotation sheets or pro forma invoices, okay, that they send all this to you. They have probably a website that might not be up to date, but have a look if they have one. They might have a 5-year gold supplier Alibaba status, which, by the way, just means they paid to get that status, right? This is really, this is really one of these things that make me laugh. I mean, gold supplier. This is really marketing for the Chinese side. This is not even marketing for the buyer side. Anyway, it makes them feel more legitimate, and then they pay for it, and it does give a feeling to buyers that it is more legitimate. But really, it just means they paid and they exist basically.
You wrote really about that.
Yeah, yes. That gold suppliers versus other suppliers, it doesn't mean anything. So check all that. If it's different addresses, different phone numbers, different why. If here they say they have 50 people, over there they say they have 500 people. If they say they make furniture, and here they say they make home appliances, and now they say they make masks and thermometers, you can ask some questions. Hey, there's some stuff I don't understand here. If they have their story straight, they will come out clean. If not, they will think, oh, this buyer is really, sniffing around, and this is, they will try to avoid you. They will self-eliminate in the process if they don't have a clear story to tell. Okay, and maybe it is just that they are being very opportunistic and so on. But it's good for you to know. I mean, do you want to work with people who might switch to a totally different line of business next year? It's a good thing for you to know.
Sure.
Trade shows, have they, Google around, have they participated in trade shows? For example, on Global Sources, you will see it. That's, the fact that they have a paid account, the fact that they have participated in trade shows, especially if it's been 2, 3, 5 years in a row, means some consistency, some level of, let's say, reassurance as the buyer. They already, one step above the random supplier that you might find somewhere randomly, basically. Okay. The certain things. Okay, this one is a funny one. One of our clients told me about that, and I was like, yeah, I mean, why not? Well, okay, you can look at the address, right? Obviously not on Google, but if you get their address in Chinese, then you should always, from the beginning, request their official company name and official address in Chinese, because that's the only official name and address that they have. Anything in English, in whatever you want, is not official. They can write whatever they want. So as for their address in Chinese, and then go on baidu.cn or on Bing, I think it's cn.bing.com or something like that, the Microsoft search engine. Plug the address. You might have to remove some of the characters on the right until you find something that corresponds. And if you see it's in downtown Shanghai or downtown Shenzhen, well, that's not a manufacturing site, right? And you can ask all of these things to them. Hey, how come? Are you there in that building? But that's not a factory building, right? And see how they explain it. Because if they told you from the beginning that they are a manufacturer, well, they better have their story straight. Because if they lie from the beginning, well, that's no good. So what did that client tell me? He told me, hey, when you buy samples, because a lot of people who listen to us, when they start talking to potential suppliers, they will also want to look at a sample, right? Especially now that we cannot travel, we cannot go to the Canton Fair and things like that. So request a sample, they will say, okay, it's whatever, $50, or say, okay, I will pay it to your company bank account, right? And then if they insist on a personal account in Hong Kong or something like that, it's not a very good sign. Why not? But it just means maybe they want to keep things simple. But you can request. It's not it's not a weird request. I mean, any established company has some rules, and they know that. So you have to say, no, this is the rules of our company. We only pay to your company bank account, and say, give me your address, and I work with whatever, UPS, FedEx. Okay, my guys will come and pick it up in your place. You don't even need to worry about setting it up. You don't need to worry about sending the samples. I will take care of that. We'll come and pick you up. Okay. Well, if last time we mentioned a funny case where a company gets scammed, and then they send us to look at the building, and where the scammers were. They were supposed to be on the 25th floor or something of a building that actually only has 5 floors, right? If that's the case, well, it's going to be some issue. It's easier to notice it, right? So there's some interesting tips like that. You can also now if you don't have the right credentials in the right IT system, and you cannot read Chinese, you cannot do that. But there's a lot of companies, including ours, including pretty much any lawyer can do that. So some others, China Checkup and so on, are specialized in that. It's basically going in one of these applications that allow you to check directly into the government database. So for this, again, you need to have the Chinese official company name in Chinese characters. And if you do that, you can get a lot of information. You will know when they were founded, who the shareholders are. So is it one individual, a bunch of individuals? Is it another company, whatever? How much capital, right? So if it's 100,000 RMB, well, I'm sorry, this is probably not a manufacturing company. If it's 10 million, okay, that's believable. Okay, if it's 1 billion, then maybe you're talking to a really big company. Maybe it's not. It's too big for you, actually, right? But this is interesting. Also, you can I think you can check if all that capital was paid up. Has already been paid up, so. Because in China it doesn't have to be that way immediately. You can also go and check somewhere. I can't remember, but our staff does it sometimes. Is go and check if they were sued and they were found guilty in a court of law, a Chinese court of law. Now that's interesting. I mean, if they have a very reckless behavior and they get how to say, sanctioned a few times, and they get sentenced, they lost in court, that tells you something. I would say it's not a very good thing. And you can even know roughly the reasons for that, which is which is interesting. Yet another thing, if you are worried that they might steal your intellectual property, you can actually check if they have trademarks and patents in their name. Well, maybe you're trying to work with a company that has a lot of IP and they have their own patents and things like that. You can check it up if the story lines up with what they say. But also, if it doesn't look like they do a lot of R&D, but they have a patent and they have a couple of trademarks, maybe things that are totally not related to what they do, maybe, well, this might mean that they were in contact with a company that had certain technologies or a certain brand name, and ta-da, they registered that intellectual property in China under their own name. Not very nice, but common, very common. Okay, so these are all, let's say they are not proofs of anything, but they can give you certain points to clarify. Okay, you can request them to clarify. And if you find a lot of these contradictions, let's say, or suspicious points, maybe it's just too many. You need to go to somebody else, right? Let me see. I could go on and on, but
well, the beauty of all of those activities that you've just mentioned is that they can almost all just be done from abroad. So anyone that's having trouble going to China at the moment, which is, well, basically everyone, actually you can do a lot of this research from your home office, with perhaps the exception of the factory audit, of course.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yes. You can actually ask for their business license, which again would be all Chinese, but you can get a lot of the information I mentioned before: official name and address, capital, exact scope. So that's extremely important. There's the scope on the business license, what they are actually allowed to do. So if it says manufacturer of plastic toys and you're about to buy plastic toys, that's good. If it does not say manufacturer of plastic toys, and I tell you, oh yeah, it's fine, it's no. It's actually illegal for them to make plastic toys if it's not written there, right?
Sure.
It's also possible to check if they have an export license. So this is really not something that you should base your decisions on, really, but because it's really fully allowed and totally legal to sell products to overseas companies, even if you do not have an export license. Now, it still means they have to work with an intermediary that will take 1 or 2%, and that might leak some confidential information if needed. I mean, or it adds a little bit of friction and risk in the process, but really not that much. Now, the export license also has a scope, right? So again, if they say they make a lot of plastic toys, but the export license says furniture, what's that, right? Please explain. There's a lot of things you can cross-check, right? ISO 9001 certificate. That's, I mean, now in China, pretty much everybody's got that. And in many cases, it doesn't mean much. But if you have a background in quality management, if you understand these things, you can ask for a few documents. You can ask for the certificate, and you can often verify it. But you can also ask for the manual, and you want to see what the quality objectives are. You want to see what the scope of the quality management system is. There's a lot of things you can pull out of this, and I'm not going to go too deep into this because maybe some people really don't know anything about management system standards. But if the supplier doesn't want to send that to you, that's a bit surprising, let's say, okay? Because you're not asking about all their SOPs and all of their recalls and forms and things like that. You're just asking for something that's actually designed to be sent to customers. Okay, same thing with ISO 14001 and so on. And there are some sector-specific quality management system standards, right? So medical devices, 13485. Automotive parts, this one is not under ISO, it's under IATF now, 16949. And there's some others, you know, aerospace and others, but really it's the same concept, really, that what I mentioned. Okay, so that's the kind of documents that you can request, and you can check maybe on your side in a covert manner, or ask them and in a more overt manner, say, hey, what is this? I mentioned before, if you are afraid that they might take some of your intellectual property away from you and maybe resell that to their own customers and cut you off, well, you can ask a few questions, you know, hey, very simple. How do you ensure no leakages of confidential information? How, you know, what, do you have a standard agreement for customers like us? I mean, this is such a simple question, and yet customers usually don't ask it. And maybe they have a great template. Maybe they're going to take a template prepared by a law firm, and sent from another customer, and they might just send that to you, basically signal that they are okay to sign that. Which, you know, if the template, if you know how to read that agreement and see what really the important points are, that can give you a lot of information. Or maybe they denature it, they remove all the teeth out of it, and then you know it's kind of a joke. It's not a good sign, right? You can send it to your lawyer. Obviously, they can comment on that if they have some experience dealing with Chinese suppliers. Don't do that with your divorce lawyer or anything like that.
And we've said it before, these documents probably are going to be in Chinese. They're not going to be English documents.
It could be bilingual, but it's better if you want relatively smooth enforcement. It's better if there's a Chinese version. Yeah, for sure. It's not a must, but it might depend on the court. I've read different things about that. Okay. Reference customers. Obviously, this is something you would like to know. Who do they currently work with? And on their side, they're not going to give you, oh, here's 5 current customers and the phone numbers and the email address. Because remember, if they have a paid account on Alibaba or Global Sources, if they do trade shows and things like that, a lot of people contact them. They're not going to give this list to a lot of people because their current customers are going to say, hey, enough. You know, I don't want any one of these calls ever again. I had 10 calls last week. Thank you very much. I'm your customer. I cannot, you know, so they know that. And they also know that, let's say you could be one of their competitors. Sorry, you could try to be an agent or a trading company, and you could actually get a list of customers that currently buy this kind of products. You could actually get an idea about the price by talking to them. And if you say, I want to buy the same product, well, you know, what is it? And that customer roughly, you know, what's the quantity they buy? Okay, so what kind of price can I have, and so on. So you can have a lot of information that's dangerous to the potential customer. So I totally agree with them. I mean, they should not give that information away. However, they should commit once the basic business discussion has been engaged and you guys are roughly in agreement on the important things. Well, then at that point, they should give you, you know, 1 or 2 contacts. So that's a tricky one, reference customers. And a lot of them are pretty proud, and they will say, oh, we work with such and such. We work with Walmart, and we work with, okay. Well, first, more and more customers, even though it's still a small minority, more and more of these importers, especially retailers, publish the list of their suppliers. If they say, I work for Apple, well, you can actually go to the Apple list of suppliers. Same thing if they say, I work with H&M, I work with Patagonia, and so on. You can actually check that up. So they if that's true, they can say it and really back it up. If they say it and you don't find their name, you can already eliminate them, right?
Interesting.
But it's at least what you need to do, and that's useful at another level. Try to understand, okay, who do you work with? What's the typical order quantity? What's the typical quality standard? Because Chinese suppliers will, especially the salespeople who are paid on commission, they will try to sell anything to you. If you say, I'm in the market to buy 1 million bananas, they will say, okay, we can sell bananas to you. So you need to, don't show your cards right away. Don't say, well, we do this, we have this quality standard, and this is very important to us, and so on. Try to understand exactly what's important to their main 1 or 2 customers. The main customer, the number 1 customer, is the one really they organized all of their systems around. And let's say, for example, you buy garments, and they say, oh, yes, we sell a lot to Walmart. Oh, well, if you were about to place orders of 5,000 pieces at a time and expect a high quality standard, run away, okay? If they say Marks and Spencer, it's already a little bit better, right? You need to know roughly how your requirements are positioned versus that big customer's requirements. Familiarity with export standards. If they make products with electronic components, and they say, oh, yes, many customers in the US, and they say, okay, so what's the standards for that? What's the UL standard on the batteries? Is it compulsory actually? What's FCC? What do your guys actually do to increase the chance of passing the FCC certification? Things like that. Then, if they don't know how to respond to you, allow them to get back to their technical team. If they still can give you a good answer, that is a red flag. That is a big red flag, right? Also, hey, communication. So usually buyers give way too much importance to the ease of communication. They will talk to a supplier and they will say, oh, this one is really easy to talk to them. I love it. And well, nice job. You just found yourself a trading company. And yes, they really, good English. They're somewhere in Hong Kong, and you're talking to the boss, and there's nobody else, right? Is that actually what you're looking for? Or they're very good for selling, but then after that, when things go into production, there's no systems, there's nothing. Is that what you want, right? On the other hand, if you find that communication is very rough, well, try to understand why. Maybe they just hired a young graduate who can speak English, some English, and she's trying to be translating what maybe the wife of the boss is telling her, and they just have 50 people. And if that person leaves, they have nobody else who can speak English. Is that what you want? You need to ask yourself the right questions here. You need to use the data. So it's not just about collecting data here. Everything I'm saying, you also need to interpret it. I think that's the big takeaway. And if you're buying in China for the first time, I totally understand. This is really confusing. You don't know. Maybe you have no idea what is the best for you, right? So talk to people. There might be some other importers in your area that are willing to give you a little bit of help and a little bit of mentorship and answer your questions when you run into trouble or when you're really unsure of what to do. This is really, really valuable, right? Seize this opportunity. Don't just try to follow a book, because what makes sense for one company might not make sense to another company, right? And that's really my overall advice here. Have your eyes open, gather data, do your due diligence. However, don't take any one of these things as a showstopper, right? Yeah, that's really where we see the personality of the buyers coming front and center. I remember I've run into these kind of people, but not with this kind of anecdote. There's a funny book called Poorly Made in China. It came out, wow, more than 10 years ago, I guess. And the author, Paul Midler, refers to an American buyer who goes to Shantou. So Shantou city in east of Guangdong province. So first, already that in itself is a red flag. But anyway,
if you know, you know.
So he goes there, and then he goes to a factory, and then it's pretty obvious that the 40 or 50 people there have never really been making this kind of product, and it's a big mess and everything. And it's like, and he comes out of that, he's really happy. It's like, they're really motivated. They're trying really hard. That would be great. Like I can bully them. I can do all kinds of things. I know they're cheating. Maybe they don't know I know, but I know. This is one of these buyers. Anyway, we don't work with these people, but just weird. But he's this person will see what to me is a huge red flag and sees it as a big plus, right? And obviously later in the book you see that they run into all kinds of trouble. You have a supplier that's cheating from the very beginning, and you're happy about that. I mean, it is just I don't know. No comments.
That's a good book. That's a good book. I'll add the link to that in the show notes. I think it is a good read. You're right.
Yeah. So I guess I could keep going, but this is already a pretty good list. I think
sure
that people
absolutely.
can do very inexpensively. A little bit of time, maybe a little bit of money to go get the data where they are. But if you don't even do that, don't bother buying in China. Basically,
Right.
That's the harsh reality.
Well, I think the cost of what you've just spoken about. I mean, it is possible to do a lot of those activities on quite a budget, which is going to be particularly good for the likes of hardware startups and people like that. So, it's not something that's necessarily going to mean that you need to sink thousands and thousands of dollars into it, right?
Oh no, for everything I said here, you might have to pay for a little bit of service, but we're talking $100, $200. We're not talking thousands.
So it's really accessible. It's just, I suppose it's about finding what's best for your business in terms of what you feel comfortable with.
Absolutely. And maybe you want to engage a lawyer in your country who can also give you advice along the way and things like that. Obviously, this would be thousands of dollars. But some of our clients have done that, and I'm not going to discourage anybody from doing that. It's also an option.
Sure. Excellent. Okay. Well, thanks for those tips. I think that gives the listener a really good roadmap on what they initially start doing when they are sourcing from China. So yeah, good advice there. Thanks, Renaud.
Great. Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, that's a wrap on this episode of the podcast. If you've enjoyed it, don't forget to like and share to spread the word. If you've got any questions about this topic or any others for Renaud, why not contact us on Sofeast.com, and you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and anywhere else that you find your podcasts from. Until next time, we'll catch you then.